We're back today, December 3rd, an amazing day in history because it was on this date, December 3rd, that the Protestants in Scotland signed their first covenant uniting Presbyterians into the Congregation of the Lord. That's what they call themselves. And the Presbyterian Church, for those who don't know, is largely due to the work of John Knox in Scotland. So it has Scottish roots to it. Of course, it's still around. But that was on this date in 1557. In 1730, Colley Cibber was appointed Poet Laureate of England. And I know that means a lot to all of you. It means something to me because there's a great English writer, the second most quoted writer in the English language, second most quoted English writer in the English language. Pay no attention to my umbrella falling there. Is a guy named Alexander Pope. Alexander Pope is famous for such lines as "a little learning is a dangerous thing." What else did he? "True wit is nature to advantage dressed, what oft was thought, but ne'er so well expressed." A lot of very famous lines in English, phrases, expressions you heard are from Alexander Pope. And the thing about Alexander Pope is that he hated Colley Cibber. He just absolutely hated Colley Cibber. Because I took a class in college on 18th century literature. We were talking about Alexander Pope. And a large part of the class was talking about Alexander Pope. And like every other thing he wrote had some snarky comment about what a bad poet Colley Cibber was. So it was like, I don't know much about the guy other than the fact that Alexander Pope hated him. Okay, but be that as it may. It was on this date in 1818 that Illinois became a state. Illinois became a state. 1818 saw thy founding, Illinois, Illinois. You know the song? The interesting thing about that is, in order for us to become a state, the rules at the time, in order to become a state, was you had to have a certain number of residents. And then every 10, something like 20,000 residents. You had to have 20,000 residents to become a state. And then in 1820, the every 10-year census was taken. So they took the census in 1820 of Illinois, and Illinois had something like 18,000 residents. So one of two things happened, and being Illinois residents, I'll let you decide. Either Illinois, in an age of great migration where people were moving from the East Coast to the West, actually lost 2,000 residents, or we lied about it. So I'll let you decide what the Illinois politicians did in 1818 in order to get. I'm kind of leaning toward the latter, but that's just me. So yeah, 1818, Illinois becomes a state. In 1931, Alka-Seltzer first went on sale. Alka-Seltzer first went on sale. I had a youth pastor once who loved Alka-Seltzer. He just loved Alka-Seltzer, and I know that because he would talk about it. He would say, I just love the taste of Alka-Seltzer. I could drink it like pop. He was. It's an interesting guy. But he would talk about things that, and the point I think he was making the first time I heard it was like things that you like that aren't necessarily good for you. And he's like, but I don't drink it like, I could. I love the flavor of Alka-Seltzer. But it first went on sale on this date in 1931. In 1950, Paul Harvey began his first national radio broadcast. Does anybody remember Paul Harvey? Paul Harvey, and now the rest of the news. Paul Harvey, good day, kind of thing. Great newscaster, kind of a storyteller sort of guy. Started in 1950. In 1957, the play Streetcar Named Desire opened. This is with Stella, and it was directed by Elie Kazan. I stuck that in there just because. I like the play. I've seen it. Elie Kazan is one of those guys who has a granddaughter who's a very famous very famous actress, Zoe Kazan. Maybe you've seen her in a couple of films or shows around. She's around. On this date in 1960, Camelot opened on Broadway. Camelot, a law was made a distant moon ago here. July and August cannot be too hot. With Richard Burton as Arthur, Julie Andrews as Guinevere, and Robert Goulet playing Lancelot. And I say that because 30 years later, Debbie and I went downtown and saw Camelot again, only this time with Robert Goulet as King Arthur. We saw that. So we saw Robert Goulet in Camelot. Okay, not that Camelot, a different Camelot, but Robert Goulet was in it. 67, Christian Barnard, name ring a bell? First heart transplant. Took place in South Africa on this date. And finally, and this is the big one, it was on this date in 1968 that Elvis's comeback special aired. You know, I did not watch it, but it was on this date in 1968. His comeback special. He would have been 33, I think, at the time. Elvis was the same age as my dad. I have a friend, I know it's just hard to believe, but we tolerate each other's company. So he and I are 6 weeks apart in age. And my dad and his dad were about 6 weeks apart in age. And Elvis was born right in between them. So we just talk about the big three: his dad, my dad, and Elvis. Those were the big three. So, but yeah, it was on this date. If you've ever seen pictures of Elvis in TV in a black leather outfit, that's probably from the '68 comeback special, which was on this date, December 3rd, 1968. We are back in 1 Corinthians. I was going to start talking over there, but then I realized it looks kind of weird on the video when I'm editing it, and I'm talking off screen, kind of thing. But all right, remember, 1 Corinthians is Paul's letter to the church at Corinth, a church that he had been at for a year and a half, a church that he had a lot invested in, a church where he had significant friendships, a church that he had been communicating with prior. We tend to believe that there was a previous, could be as many as 4 letters, could be 100 for all we know, but there's indications that there are 4 letters that were sent between Paul and the church at Corinth. We know, I believe it was in chapter 5, Paul refers to a previous letter. So what we call 1 Corinthians is definitely not the first letter Paul ever got or sent to the church at Corinth. He's clearly responding to a letter. The first half of the text is Paul dealing with some things he's heard. People from Chloe's household have sent him some stuff, and so he figures one of those kind of questions that, well, since we're talking, let me tell you about this. And then starting with, I believe it's chapter 6, Paul says, now about the things you wrote about. I think it's, no, I don't know where. Oh, chapter 7. Starting with chapter 7, he says, now for the matters you wrote about. And so as we go through the rest of the book, from chapter 7 through to the end of the chapter, Paul is responding to things happening at the church at Corinth. Okay, sometimes he specifically deals with the situation, sometimes he kind of goes broader, and that's one of the challenges in looking at this text, to say, okay, what of these is a specific situation, and how broadly do we apply these particular things. 1 Corinthians is interesting because it's been used for a lot of fun stuff, some good, some, shall we say, bad, and we'll see how that goes. I don't think we're going to get in too much trouble today. So again, where he says now about, in the beginning of chapter 8 verse 1, now about, it's a reminder that Paul is responding to a letter from the Corinthians. Okay, so there's something in the letter, and we don't have the letter. Okay, so all we can do is speculate, and between what Paul says and what we know about Corinth and what we've read in other texts and what we see in the book of Acts and what we know from history, we can kind of get an idea that this is probably what's going on, but we can never really be 100% certain what is happening in Corinth. And so That's an issue in dealing with any of the epistles, especially the ones that are what we call occasional epistles, meaning they arise out of a particular occasion. Okay, not all epistles are like that. I mean, Romans is kind of a doctrinal treatise, but I think Romans has its own purpose as well. But so now in verse 1, he starts into this topic of food sacrificed to idols. Okay, so food sacrificed to idols. What is going on here? Okay, and I've been trying to figure out how to describe this, whether I should read through the text, but I think we've all probably heard sermons relating to this at one point or another, because it establishes a principle that's very commonly used in Christian life and practice. The idea of being a stumbling block. What does it mean to be a stumbling block? Kind of thing. So food sacrificed to idols, what is going on? So it's either one of two things, okay? Either one of two things. So I'm going to throw it out there, and then we're going to kind of go through the text, okay? So the assumption, and again, this is trying to draw in as much as we can. On the one hand, Corinth is not a Christian. I mean, there are no Christian cities at this point, and so Corinth is not a Jewish city. There's a Jewish population there, of course, but it is predominantly a Gentile city, and it is believed, based on the writing and things and what we know about some of the pagan rituals, that there was a whole process in the pagan ritual ceremonies, okay, that started with some sort of animal sacrifice, okay, and then the animal was sacrificed, and then part of the meat or all of the meat was served up in a meal of some sort, okay, and people would attend the meal and eat free, eat cheaply, I don't know, just it would be part of the process, okay? So they would come, so meat is being offered as part of a pagan service, and Corinthian believers are attending, okay? So there's a service, and hey, it's about lunchtime, let's go. They go over there, they walk into the church, I'm calling it the church, the temple, whatever, sit down, having a meal of this nice meat. Now, serving the meat as food isn't unusual, because in the Old Testament, some of the pieces of meat from sacrifice were given to the priest to eat. And I suppose if a priest wanted to give it to somebody, he could. But regardless, so that's the first idea of what's going on. Okay? The second idea of what's going on is that leftover meat, say they had a ton of things being sold or being sacrificed and not enough people to eat it, is being sold at market, and Corinthian believers are buying it. So this is a special meat. It's kind of like the day-old meat or something. I don't know if it's a special deal or if it's a special, it's probably the good stuff. It wasn't, it certainly was for the Jewish believers, or for the Jewish, those of the Jewish faith, that you were supposed to bring the good stuff, the good meat, to be sacrificed. Otherwise, it really isn't a sacrifice, right? So that's and so this is the second idea. And in my growing up, the second idea was more common to me, as people would kind of describe it. Generally, people kind of defaulted to, oh, this is what's going on. That, oh, there's meat, and they're going and buying it, taking it home, and eating it. Okay. As I'm getting older, not necessarily wiser, just older, I'm leaning more toward the first idea, and I'll tell you why as we get down to the passage here. So meat is being offered to. So I think what's going on, I lean toward the first, but it's not a hill I'm going to die on. That meat is being offered to idols, and Corinthian believers are attending this meal afterwards. Okay, now. Other believers are seeing this going on. Other believers, perhaps believers who are just saved, have just accepted Christ, have just joined the way. That's what Christianity was referred to at the time. They're seeing this, and they're going, oh, look, that guy over there, kind of thing. And it's affecting their walk. in some significant way. Okay, and the Corinthians know that they've got an issue there, and they're looking to Paul to either. I don't think they're looking to. I think the gist of the Corinthian letter to me. This is again. I'm talking about a letter that I haven't seen, that nobody has seen, but I think they're more looking for validation than they are advice. Okay, do you know what I mean? When people ask you a question and they're really looking for validation, they're not really looking for advice. You know, what do you think of the job I did on this art piece? Do they really want you to say, well, you know, your colors are terrible, everything is, no, they want you to say it's a good job. Okay, and that's fine, we get it, right? And I think here they're looking for validation that this is okay, despite the fact that it's harming people. And I tried to think of this, and Debbie and I have been going back and forth on this a couple times. Is there really a cultural equivalent to this? Okay, is there really something that we can look at in our society and say, wow, that I get that? And there really isn't. And so I was trying to kind of do a mental exercise and try to figure out what could possibly give you know the same sort of effect on a believer. And this is the best I came up with. Suppose every Saturday I get a newspaper, I get the Financial Times, and every Saturday they have a supplement, pretty much every Saturday, called How to Spend It, which is great because I need all the help I can in how to spend it. And they always have these fashion things. So this is how I keep up with the fashions of the day and who the great designers and stuff are. And if you guys were all wondering, Stan, who's your design? You know, kind of.
What's your style signifier?
Yeah. Every week they say, what is your style signifier? Kind of thing. And so I just get a kick out of that question when people say, what is your style signifier? Kind of thing. So you know, but so we and Debbie and I will go through this magazine and go here's and I'll find some, because it's always like this. It's out of this world stuff. It really is. I mean, it's and it was great fun to go here. I think you should wear this to church tomorrow. And her usual response is, sure, you buy it for me and I'll wear it, because usually these things are like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 for this outrageous outfit. I'm like, wow, this is you know. Maybe I should bring in pictures. I should have brought the magazine just so you could see what I'm talking about. But so, yeah. So suppose Debbie is looking through one of these, and she says, "Oh, I see this outfit, and I really like this. I'm going to, well, let me see." And she says, "No. I'm going to surprise you with it. I think it's great. It shows off my eyes. The flowing lines are amazing. I think it's going to really be great, and it's really going to stand out. I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to bring it to church. I'm going to wear it to church tomorrow." Okay, so I'm like, okay, fine, no problem, and because I'm easy to get along with that way, you know. So Sunday morning gets up, and she comes out and comes into church, and he's got her outfit on, okay, and her outfit is a burqa. You know what a burqa is? It's the Islamic outfit. It's a flowing robe and a full head covering with only the eyes showing. Okay, just showing only the eyes, except it's brightly flowered. Okay, now everyone I've ever seen is black. Okay, so again, people, women in a lot of Islamic countries wear this, and it's just you only see the eyes, but it's exactly like every burqa you've ever seen, except it's flowery. That's the only difference, right? And she comes in, and you all would be looking at her going, "That's interesting outfit you got there, Deb," and she'd be going, "Oh yeah, it's so great. I just love this and this kind of thing," and we'd all kind of go, "All right." Most of us would think it's kind of a little unusual, but we'd go with it, right? None of us would really say anything. However, Suppose, now this is a big one, suppose Marty has a friend. Okay, I know, go with me on this. Okay. Suppose Marty has a friend who lives across the street who's Islamic. Okay? And Marty has been working with the family, talking with the family, witnessing to the family, and the family is oh so close, and he believes that they have actually trusted Christ. But they're still a little, hesitant, because again, it's not, you don't just walk away from one religion into another. They're still a little hesitant. So finally, Marty has been pleading with them for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to come to church. So finally, Marty, they say, you know what, Marty, this Sunday, we're going to go to church with you. And so the husband gets dressed, and the wife gets dressed wearing a burqa. Okay? First time in a Christian church. First time, possibly a new believer. Okay? She walks into church. First thing she sees is Debbie in her flower burqa. We'll know what time it is. What is, at that moment, Marty is told, oh yeah, we've got a loving church, a real opening church, very, loving, everything fine. First thing she walks in the door is she sees somebody in a flowered burqa. What is she going to think? Is she going to say, wow, these guys are great. They're not making light of anything. They're not appropriating anything from Islamic culture. What is she going to think at that moment? Okay? Is she going to be, boy, I really want to, it's like, wait a minute. What is, and then Debbie walks around and showing everybody, oh, look, it's me, taking the hat off, because, the whole point of it is to maintain that no part of you other than the eyes are seen. What is that woman going to think right at that moment?
She might think it's mocking her.
And what's it going to do to her faith? Okay, so again, what is the likelihood that that's going to happen? Well, I don't know. Debbie was looking on a lot of weird things yesterday, so come back next week, we'll see what she wears. But again, I mean, it could be the same thing if I decided that I needed the person who this week's style signifier was that it was a woman who wears a hat all the time. And I said to myself, Deb, I need to up my hat game, okay? Which isn't difficult because I don't have a hat game, but I need to up my hat game. And so I go out and I get myself like a Sikh turban, okay, like with the Sikh Hindus wear, and I come into church wearing that. And that just happens to be the Sunday that Jean's friend, who happens to be Sikh, comes in. So now I've offended this person, Debbie's offended Marty's, Again, it's just wrapping, it's just cloth, it's just fabric, right? That's all it is. What's the big deal? I can wear, is there anything stopping Debbie from wearing that outfit or me from wearing a Sikh turban? No, there's no rule, there's no law, there's no Bible verse that says thou shalt not wear a Sikh turban, thou shalt not wear a burqa. You're perfectly free to do that. Okay, would that be a good idea? Okay, probably not. Okay, and I think that in a small way kind of illustrates the tension that's going on here, that this process is going on, and people there's the former Muslim, there's somebody who's Sikh, is going, wait a minute, we don't want any part of it because you guys are just mocking us with our, or you're not taking seriously, you don't realize what that means, okay? And I think that's kind of an idea of what's happening in Corinth, and the Corinthians want validation to say, hey, listen, we can wear a burqa, we can wear a Sikh hat if we want to, right, Paul? Paul says, well, let's think about this, okay? So, we know that we all possess knowledge, okay? So Paul prefaces his argument here by quoting, I think, from the letter. And this is something that Paul does a lot through Corinthians. This is something, again, in the original manuscript, when we see the original manuscript, if you look at, well, we don't see the original manuscript, but the manuscripts that we have don't include quotation marks. Okay, there's no punctuation. All right, it's just you look at the grammar, you look at to figure out where the sentence is ending and all of that, but there's no quotation marks. And so we have to look at a lot of these. Sometimes Paul says, you say this, and there's a statement. Other times, you just kind of have to reason from the context that he's probably quoting something or saying something that the Corinthians would agree to or would understand without having to give it a reference or anything. So if Debbie does something, I'm really picking on her today. I'm sorry, dear. I do love you. You know that, right? It's on tape. Okay.
Find out on the way home.
Yeah. No, I won't, because she's not coming home with me today.
Oh, okay.
This is why I'm taking advantage of all of this. I know I'm going to don't have to worry about a long, quiet ride home. But if Debbie says something to me, and this kind of stuff happens a lot around Shay Ray, where she'll say something. Do we need to do this? And I'll say, oh, reason not to need. Okay, and I don't have to tell Debbie, hey, listen, I'm going to quote Shakespeare here. Ready? Are you ready? Reason not to need. Okay, or she does something, and I say, oh, the lady doth protest too much, methinks. Okay, I don't have to tell her that I'm quoting Shakespeare. I don't have to explain to her. This is this happened in my 9th grade class the other day. Somebody said something, and I replied with, the lady doth protest too much, methinks. Yeah, worse, negative crickets. I should have just turned around and talked to the wall. I would have gotten a better response, kind of thing. And it's like, that's Shakespeare. Yeah, writer, but I don't have, and I think that's kind of when Paul gives these statements, he's not crediting them. He's not giving back and saying, oh, this is what you said all the time, because they're the ones that said it. Okay, so they understand this. He's responding to this letter. And again, this is something that goes over and over and over and over again. And if you don't take that into account, you have some really weird exegetical stuff that happens, meaning kind of you have to say, oh, wait a minute. Here he says this, and there he says something completely opposite. Okay, so you either understand that there's some quotation going on, or you have some internal contradictions in the text. Okay, but here is like he says, we know this. We know that we all possess knowledge. Okay? But knowledge puffs up while love builds up. Those who think they know something do not yet know as they ought to know, but whoever loves God is known by God. Okay? So, speculation. The letter says to Paul, by the way, we know that there's really no problem with this meat, so we're doing this, right? Is that okay? And Paul's response here is something along the line of, the fact that you know something isn't the criterion by which you determine whether it's the right or wrong thing to do. Okay? The criterion is whether you're doing something according to the love of God. So just because something is technically correct doesn't make it the right or ethical thing to do. Okay? The fact that you have freedom to do it doesn't mean you have to do it. Okay? Knowledge puffs up while love builds up. I mean, we went to a church for a while, and one of the criticisms I had of the church, and I was in the leadership of the church, so it's half my own fault as well. But we liked to point out a lot all the things we didn't do. Oh, we don't do that around here. We don't do that around here. And sometimes, the pastor guy, we don't follow a church liturgy here. I'm like, yes, we do. No, we don't. Yes, we do. Just because it doesn't look like the liturgy, the church always has this order. We do this, we do this, we do this. That's a church liturgy. Just because it isn't a Catholic church liturgy doesn't mean it's not a church liturgy. Okay? And so we would go, oh, this is what we don't do. I've got freedom to do this, so therefore I'm going to do it. Okay. That doesn't make it a good idea. Okay, and so Paul is here, just for the record, things done out of the love of God are what matters, not necessarily out of knowledge. So, but whoever loves God is known by God. Things done out of love are what is known of God. Okay. So then, verse 4, about eating food sacrificed to idols. Now it's going to get back to, let's get back to this whole food sacrificed to idols thing. We know that an idol is nothing at all in this world and that there is no God but one. Okay, so Paul agrees that an idol has no objective reality. It is just an idol. It is just a piece of wood. It is just a piece of gold. It is just an object. Okay, I understand that it is just a set of fabric. It is just a hat or a head covering. I don't know what they call it. Head covering, I guess, to be more accurate. Okay, that's it. That's the objective reality. Paul agrees that that's the objective reality of it. You're right on that point. Okay. But then beginning in verse 5, for even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came, and for whom we live, and there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things come and through whom we live. Okay, so I think here what Paul is talking about, he says, listen, we know that there's only the one God. We know that. Okay. But then he says, but wait, but there are gods, there are many gods and many lords. And I think the point here he's trying to make is that these gods, these idols, these deities have a subjective reality to those in that religion. It means something to them. Okay, so it's one of those whether the factor, we're coming up on a certain season of the year where it's widely held that there's an individual that exists who may or may not actually exist. Okay, and as a very busy day on December 25th, assuming he exists, with the help of 8 reindeer. Okay, and for some people, he is very, very real. He is a very, very real person, and there's a boatload of Hallmark movies that would suggest he is, in fact, in series and a lot of Netflix miniseries and the like. Okay, and so to those individuals, to a certain group of individuals, this person, because this is all tape, and I don't want to be accused of harshing on anybody's Christmas vibe. This person is very real. Okay, and if you go in and say something against said person, has anybody ever spilled the beans about this person to someone? Yeah. Okay. So I can imagine when, your kid, a kid comes up to you and says, boy, who's going to come visit my house on December 25th? And you say, no one, absolutely no one. There's no one coming down your chimney. There is no one. That is not going to happen. That would be one good way for me and my one and only friend to never speak, But you see, so there is a subjective reality there. And Paul is saying that, look, I get it. There is only one God. But this God is real to them, and you have to take that into account. Okay? So here in verse 6, so however an ideal may, I must say that should be idle, not ideal. That word should be idle. Spell check is a great thing, but it doesn't tell you whether it's the right word. It just tells you whether that word is spelled correctly. Idle. An idol may have a subjective reality. In other words, it's real to them. Okay, so it's very serious to them. They take it very seriously. Okay, and you can't just blow it off and say, "Oh, that's not real. It's just not true." And there are some approaches to ministry where that's all you just say. Well, this is the truth. This is the truth, and I don't need to deal with what you believe. I'm right, you're wrong. End of story. Okay, but in real to them. Now in 8:6, he talks about God, and he gives an interesting passage there. In 8:6, Paul reveals 3 truths about the Father. There, verse 6, he says, "Yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came, all things." Where did I lost my place already? "And for whom we live, and there is but one Lord." there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. So the three things he reveals: God is Father, God is our source. You can compare Colossians 1:15, in him all things consist. And we are for God's purpose. So yeah, I agree. The objective reality is there is just that one God. I get that. I understand that. I agree with you. You're 100% right. We also have to realize our purpose is to serve him, and what he notices is things done out of love in the first verse of the chapter. Okay? And so in 8:7, Paul urges sensitivity to other believers. Be careful. I'm sorry, where am I? Verse 7. But not everyone possesses this knowledge. Okay? Not everyone gets this. Not everyone has this. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to a god. And since their conscience is defiled, since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. Okay? Yes.
I got a question. So, this food that's offered to idols, I never thought of this before. Obviously, it's offered at some type of religious organization. Was that part of the custom is to eat it afterwards?
Yes.
Okay.
As in like a potluck. I'm speculating. I mean,
Right,
it's not.
right.
I'm just saying that they would offer it to. This is the idea. They would offer it to the idol, and then what the idol didn't eat, would turn around and say, "Okay, you're a member of the church here. If you want to come in and partake of this has been blessed by this deity. Here, come out."
In temple worship, sacrifices to God, some of them were set aside for the priests to eat. That's not entirely unusual.
No, but what I'm asking is, did the people that participated in the idolatry service, did they eat it?
Mm-hmm.
So this was like leftovers then, or more than could be consumed by those
Yes,
people?
more than could be consumed, or they just came in because again, there's going to be a meal over here at 2:00. You know, they're going to do the sacrifice at 1:30, then they're going to serve it at 2:00. Okay, whereas typically it would be only for, and again, this is
Right,
speculation
I
on my
know.
part.
But I
So
was-
the idea is that, okay, so the service starts at 1:30 and it's all a seamless production. Whereas the Corinthian believers realized that, hey, we can just show up at 2:00 and have something to eat. It's kind of like Debbie used the example coming in today. It's like people who skip the wedding and just go to the reception kind of
I
thing.
was thinking that they sacrificed these things and then took them to the marketplace.
That's the other possibility.
Yeah,
That's
what I always thought.
right, yes.
But just now, it occurred to me that maybe it was the other way.
Right.
Because of,
See, you're doing exactly what, like I said, at first, well, you weren't here. I said at first, I used to think it was just leftovers in the market. Then I'm like, no, I think it's part of this process because, and I'll get down in verse 10 here, and I'm skipping ahead for a minute. It says, for if someone with a weak conscience sees you eating the meat. So, yeah. So if they see you in the temple eating the meat, then it's not necessarily something that's done at home. Because if you take the meat, I don't know that you can look at meat. I mean, again, it's supposed to be good meat, but I don't think you can look at the meat and go, oh, that's clearly temple meat. Meat is meat, right? And so Paul urges sensitivity to other believers. Conscience, in verse 7, this is where I throw in the old Shea Ray, or it's more my family's side of the family, where you always, what would you like to do? So one member of my family says to another, what would you like to do? And the other member says, well, let your conscience be your guide. And the standard Ray family response is, I don't take advice from a stranger.
I guess you have to be there.
No. So, but here the whole idea, conscience is not necessarily, I think it's more along the line of moral consciousness, not necessarily what we have come to understand as being our conscience. Okay. Or it could be both. In verse 8, So some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to a god, and since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. But in here, this is probably a quotation, another quotation. But food does not bring us near to God. We are no worse if we do not eat, and no better if we do. Now, clearly, he's talking about a spiritual, in a spiritual sense, because obviously you are worse if you don't eat. You die eventually, kind of thing. But he's talking. It's not doing anything for them spiritually. It's not doing anything for us spiritually. There's no food that you can eat that will get you closer to God. There's no food that you can eat that's going to drive you away from God. Okay? So verse 9 introduces the stumbling block principle. The stumbling block. Be careful, however, that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if somebody with a weak conscience sees you with all your knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? I mean, just, imagine if, what would you think if, I don't know if this is even a good example, if there were a, like the big Catholic church in the area had a big Christmas program. And so all of the Baptists decide, hey, we're going to go because it's Christmas. Right? It's like, well, wait, is there a difference? Or maybe it's so they have an Assumption of Mary party. I don't know. I'm not Catholic. I've never been Catholic, so I'm making stuff up at this point. So if somebody sees that, it's going to destroy their conscience. And I just quoted Gordon Fee's description of it, of the stumbling block principle. He says, love takes the form of the stumbling block principle, which does not have to do with offending someone, but with causing others to fall by urging them to participate in an action they can only do against their own conscience. Okay? And the word offend there can also be translated destroy. And I think, Christianity, evangelical Christianity, Protestant, the kind that I grew up with, got a lot of mileage out of, policing each other because, I find that offensive. I find having a TV offensive. So therefore you should not have a TV. I find doing that is offensive. I can't do that. The world kind of understands this. I mean, Christians are the ones that are, seem to be, there's no law against it, so I can do whatever I want. The world sort of understands that if you have a party and somebody is coming to your party, or you're going to dinner with somebody who's a recovering alcoholic, a struggling, recovering alcoholic, okay, what do you not do? You don't offer, you don't order a drink. The world knows this, okay? We get that. But it's like, well, no, we're believers, so we can go eat the meat. There's no objective reality to it, okay? And it isn't a question of the fact that I just don't think you should do that. I think, I'm trying to think of something, I think people, I find it offensive that people spend so much time watching Shakespeare. So I just think, and have you ever met somebody like that where I really like Shakespeare, or I really like this, I really like reading this person, or I like watching Shakespeare plays, or I really like playing golf, or I really like this. And somebody pulls in with the whole, I spend all that time in prayer.
Try to guilt trip.
And it's like, okay, really that kind of people, that offends me, people who spend, that much time watching Shakespeare plays. I just do that because we have seen our share of Shakespeare plays. Something I tried to figure out the actual count once, and it's somewhere between 200 and 400, somewhere in that area. Number of Shakespeare plays we've seen. We've only seen the 37. It's just some of them we've seen more than others. Like Hamlet, we've seen 30 times. Okay. How do you see Hamlet 30 times? Oh, I could tell you. I could list them out for you. It would take a while, but I'm not going to do that.
It's been over 30 years.
Yeah, it's been over a 30-year time period. So, be that so again, the stumbling block principle is something to say. Listen, just because you have the right to do something, doesn't mean you should. If it's destroying your brother or your sister, then stop it. So I was listening to a book the other day, Beth Allison Barr's book, Making a Biblical Womanhood. Really interesting book, y'all. Y'all should read it. But she quotes, and I think I've quoted in here before, the Bob Newhart bit where he played, not the TV show, but there's a bit where he plays a psychiatrist. And somebody comes in, has anybody seen this? A person comes in and has a dreadful fear. He says, I'm going to solve your problems with 3 words. It's going to cost you $5. I'm going to give you 3 words. You're going to stop. And she's like, don't you want to hear my problem? She says, well, I'm just going to tell you the same thing. She said, no, you need to hear it. Okay, fine. And so she's got this dreadful fear of being buried in a box. And his reply is, okay, I'm going to give you 3 words. Get out your pencil. Write this down. Just stop it. That's his advice. She's like, what? Yeah, just stop it. Just stop it. Just stop it. Kind of thing. And Barry, the character's name is Barry Switzer, but it's Bob Newhart. Just stop it. Google it. It's really pretty funny, especially if you like Bob Newhart. But it's like just because we have the right to do that doesn't mean you should. Again, when your moral calculus is like, wow, I don't see any reason why not. Can we do this questionable thing? I don't know. I don't see any reason. It's like, why? How does this illustrate the love of God? Does this activity I'm doing illustrate the love of God? Is somebody going to look at this activity and think, wow, God loves me? Now, again, nobody's perfect on this. I certainly am not. Okay. I mean, I spent yesterday struggling with my son's plumbing. My son bought a house, right? And so I went over to his house and to change a faucet. I figured, how difficult could it be? Change a faucet, right? So Marty, don't judge me here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Depends on how old it is and how corroded it was.
The faucet, after changing the faucet, the sink, the vanity, the tubes, the pipe, everything, hours and hours later, everything I had was working fine. I got it all working. And then something else started leaking. And I'm like, I don't know at that moment if I was really illustrating the love of God when I'm like, it's like, with the sink trap, if you do this nut, this one, then you got to do this one, and then you got to do this one, and you got to do this one. And so I got all the way back to here. All of them were fine. Every one I touched was fine. Then the one that I didn't touch started leaking. And in order to get to it, I have to disconnect everything that I did to get to it. But he said, well, AJ's coming over tonight. Good, AJ can fix it. Just kidding. I told him I'd come back and fix it. But, yeah, I don't, again, we're not all perfect at this. But again, it's like, are you destroying someone? Is it illustrating the love of God? Verse 10, for someone sees you, which argues for the first scenario noted above. I made this point earlier. The idea that they're seeing you in the temple eating this. Okay, these are things visible. With all your knowledge, this kind of reminds me of Luke 12:48. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. The fact that you have knowledge that gives you all these rights and all this freedom also gives some responsibility. Okay. Be careful, however, that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. Verse 10, for someone with a weak conscience sees you with all your knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother or sister for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. And this kind of reminds me of the passage in Matthew 25, where he's separating the sheep and the goats. And he says, when did we, here, you guys are the good guys, you guys are the bad guys. And the good guys say, what did we do? And he says, well, you gave me a drink of water, or you gave one of the least of these, you did it to me. And then the guys, did not we prophesy in your name? Did not we do all these great things in your name? It's like, yeah, but you didn't give a glass of water to this person. You didn't, you were very proud of the fact that you wore a Sikh turban or a burqa to church, but as far as doing anything practical to love that person, nothing. That's what God notices. Paul's final, the result is that a weak brother or sister is destroyed by your knowledge. The person doing this sins against Christ. Again, what would be the cultural equivalent to this? I don't know. I mean, that's a kind of a personal question. You think about what are you doing that somebody is doing that is taking license from you to do whatever, and that's drawing them away from Christ.
I have two things I want to throw out. First one is it possible that this meat was being brought to the Lord's table? That they were,
Yes,
so
could be, sure.
like that they saw them eating it at the Lord's table.
Well,
Like
when you mean the Lord's table, again, this is Corinthians, so we're going to get to what they were doing at the Lord's table later.
Okay. I mean, I had the impression that they weren't eating it in the temple. They were gathering for the Last Supper, for the commemoration, and the food they brought to the Lord's table had been sacrificed to idols.
That's as likely a possibility as any.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, we don't know. That's the thing. We don't know.
And then to your just most recent question, I think there are a lot of worship tunes that we don't sing anymore or don't consider anymore because the worship leader has done something or written something or said something. And so it's a perfectly good song, but if we did it from the front, there might be people in the congregation
Who would recognize, oh, I know where that song comes
Yeah,
from. You
that's-
guys are in tight with him.
You're
Yeah.
not allowed to, why are you doing that? Because that person's not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
We have a long list, it's getting longer, of songs that we can't.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to take up writing new songs, feel free. There's openings.
So
Okay.
that happens.
Yeah. So finally, and I'll just close with this, Paul's point here at the end of verse 13, therefore, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause them to fall. Paul is like, that's it, And from other passages, I doubt he would be the kind of guy that would constantly be pointing out to others, oh, by the way, I don't eat meat anymore because that causes my brothers. You guys go ahead. Help yourself. I don't eat it because the Lord has convicted me that that's causing people to sin, but you go right ahead and do whatever you want, kind of thing. So I don't think Paul was that kind of guy. But Paul is like, so the answer to the Corinthian church was, stop it. Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should, kind of thing. Okay, think of what would, I don't want to do that Sheldon, what would Jesus do sort of thing, but what illustrates the love of God? What illustrates the love of God in this situation? So, all right, next week we're going to get back into chapter 9, where Paul talks about his role as an apostle. So, all right, you're free to go.